Hey Tubies, it's Psychic Bob. Well, here it is. It's Saturday, and that means time for our class on spiritualism. And I've so enjoyed having this weekly session with you. Before we get into everything today, I just got to give you a little update here. Today we are not going to be doing the trance channeling session, the seance. I have a really busy schedule. I have to do stuff with my mom today, and then I've got readings, so I'm a little tight on time. But I thought at least we could come here and have a little class today. So not to worry, we'll get back next week to our channeling. But this week it's going to be a little shorter than usual, okay? By the way, check it out. I'm wearing my little blue cross today. And for those of you who've been following, you know that the blue cross is one of the traditional symbols of spiritualism. This one has little flowers in it. Isn't that cool? It's called Millefiore, 1,000 flowers. It's a Murano type glass. Anyways, I am so glad you're here. And one thing before we get into today's class, also I want to say thank you to all of you who came out to yesterday's video. We had such a good time with UFO Friday. We had a great time talking about titanium. And if you didn't see that, you need to see that. It's in the queue right before this video. But there's an important point I totally forgot to mention yesterday in the video, which I feel I have to tell you right now. For those of you, a lot of you wrote and said, Bob, I want to buy titanium jewelry. I love it. You know, titanium's cool. If you're buying titanium jewelry, make sure that you're getting real titanium. The reason why is there are people now trying to sell jewelry called titanium steel. Titanium steel is not titanium. It's really stainless steel jewelry. It looks similar, but once you've had real titanium, you know the difference. But they're tricking a lot of people into buying stainless steel jewelry. And there's nothing wrong with stainless steel jewelry. It's really beautiful. I don't think it's bad jewelry, but it's not titanium. So if you want to work with that titanium jewelry, titanium energy and real titanium, make sure to check the seller that it is not titanium steel. The inside of the jewelry should be stamped as titanium. If it doesn't have a stamp, it may not be legitimate titanium. I've heard a lot of horror stories of people buying jewelry, finding out it was stainless steel. So by law, it has to be stamped with titanium inside the band. So if you don't see it in pictures, if you're buying online, ask the seller, does it have a titanium stamp inside? Okay, and make sure it's not titanium steel. Okay, and it's an important point. And also want to say thank you to all who've been sharing with me about your healing. A lot of you said that you're so excited because you had healing, you had injuries and you had titanium joints put in and titanium already put in your body. And for those of you who've been through that, first of all, I'm sorry you went through all that horrible, having to go through that surgery and that pain. But now that you got titanium in you, you're tuned into the stars. So let it be a blessing, not a curse to your life, okay? Anyways, I'm just so glad you're here. Well, we're going to continue on with our class today. And we've been talking about the book Mystical Traveler by Sylvia Browne. God bless Sylvia, I love her. But I thought we would continue on here. Now, before we get into this, let me just paraphrase and say that one of the teachings that I really love about spiritualism, it's taught in the spiritualist religion, is that the soul has eternal progression. And that means that we're always able to go forward, to grow, and to expand our abilities and our psychic self, our soul, our love for the divine. And, my spirit guides always say, yes, you can do, growth after you die. You can do your work, but, they always say don't wait until you die and then decide to become spiritual because it's going to be much harder. It's much better for you to start now to grow your awareness of your soul. And when you go into the spirit world, you'll make faster progression. It'll be a lot easier. And one of the things that I like in this book is that they do talk about the concept of eternal progression, and that as you take up the mystical traveler mantle, it's another form of progression for the soul. Now, I have to answer a question here real quick before we get into this. Somebody, a few people actually wrote to me, and they said, Psychic Bob, are people born mystical travelers, or do they choose to become mystical travelers? Well, from what I've experienced and understood, and what looking at Sylvia's writings as well, mystical traveler is an option that everybody has on their chart. you're not actually born a mystical traveler. It's what we call an option line. So you plan your incarnation, you come down to the earth, and while you're here, you may choose to become a mystical traveler or a life mission entity. And if you don't know what life mission entity is, mystical traveler, see last week's class. We explain all that. So to answer your questions, we're not born, none of us are born mystical travelers. It's something we may choose. Now again, remember, it all comes down to free will. None of this is like you have to be a mystical traveler. The spirit world never forces us. They say, come into life, experience it, learn, love, and grow. And, do all things with love. That's one of the most important things. So if you take on the mantle of a mystical traveler, you're taking on a really big mission. I became a mystical traveler when I turned 40. I'm 50 now, and it was back 10 years ago that I took on the mantle when I left the corporate world and became a full-time psychic and devoted my whole life to spiritual work. And for those of you who are new here, this is my full-time work. I literally teach classes, I do readings, I do public appearances, and I write books. So my whole life is about spiritual work. And so I have taken on the mantle of a mystical traveler. So everybody, you have the option. Some of you may say, I don't want to do it, and that's okay. It doesn't make you less of a person. Let's look at Sylvia's 6 points here, because I think these are very well documented, and I want to share these with you. All right, so we'll continue on here. She writes, just as there are levels on the other side, there are also levels that you'll go through as a mystical traveler. However, these are sequential and more like stages. Here they are in order. Now get your pens out. If you don't have this book, you want to take some notes. And even if you do have the book, take some notes. Because you may get ideas that come to you as you're listening to these, and you want to jot that down. If you don't have a pen and paper, just pause the video and go get it, okay? And then restart. Okay, point number 1. The first level is the subconscious, or I should say superconscious. Knowledge is the subconscious, or should I say superconscious, knowledge that there is something in your soul that's crying out for your attention. It is telling you that you need to advance to a higher level of spirituality, but you don't necessarily know that you're being called to be a mystical traveler. Now I'm going to just pause there and talk about that because, as many of you know, if you've known me and sat with me, I've been doing psychic work since I was a teenager. I literally started doing haunted houses when I was a teenager in high school and investigating them. Now, at that time, was I a mystical traveler? No. But somewhere in my soul, I knew that there was even more work for me to do. That, going to haunted houses on the weekend was fun, but it was only the beginning of something more. I had no idea at that time, not consciously at least, should I say, that I would make my whole life about being a psychic and a spiritual worker. In fact, back when I did haunted house investigations, I didn't even know that I was a psychic. I just knew that I knew how to do this. I didn't call myself a psychic. I just said I can help with haunted houses. So it's funny because the seeds of becoming a mystical traveler were already implanted, but I didn't fully recognize it. And when I joined the Spiritualist church like 20 years ago, even then I didn't know I was a mystical traveler. But my teacher who trained me, she said, Bob, you've got a very important future ahead of you. You're going to be a very well-known psychic, and your whole life will be devoted to spiritualist work. And I said, what? Nah, I don't believe that. No way. But you know what? She was right. She saw in me the mystical traveler. And so you might today be saying, I feel like I'm being called, but I just don't know. Don't let that stress you. It will unfold at the right time. You can't force this. Because even though I was in the Spiritualist church, working with haunted houses, I still didn't realize I was a mystical traveler. That came a little later, not till about 10 years ago. All right, point number 2. The second level is the recognition that you want to be a mystical traveler, even if you still don't have a specific label for it. Now you see, when I took on the mantle of a full-time psychic and started my practice, it was at that point that I knew. I said, I'm not doing a job, I'm doing a calling. Now I still didn't know that term, mystical traveler, but I knew that I had a calling. And I think a mystical traveler is really, it's like not a job, it's a calling. It means your whole life is consumed by it. So you may not have a label, you may have never heard this term, but I think it's a great term, and I think it adequately describes what is happening and has happened to many people who take on this special calling of spiritual service. Okay. The third level is wrestling with the knowledge of what becoming such an advanced entity might entail. You may have received this knowledge by infusion. Now, you're saying, what's infusion? Infusion is a psychic gift. It's called infused knowledge. And this is where there's an awareness of knowledge, of fact, an awareness of something that you have no reason to know. Like you may wake up one day and you just know that if you don't go to work a certain way, if you take a different road, that you could die. You'll just know, like, I have no reason to know, but I better not go down, such and such boulevard today. That's infused knowledge. You've not heard any accidents. There's no reason for you, but you just know. Now that's in the negative sense. In the positive sense, that wrestling becomes like, wow, I really know that heaven is calling me. The spirit world is calling. And I went through this as well, where I knew it, but I didn't want to know it, And this might go on for a few years. When I was developing my psychic practice, before I left my corporate job, I was working a day job and doing this. And I remember going through this back and forth in my mind. Well, do I really want to quit my job? Could I really do this? Could it be? But yet the voice kept saying, you are meant to do this. And the spirit world said to me, you will have great joy and happiness and success if you follow. I didn't know how I knew that. And when I turned in my resignation, I thought, my God, am I crazy? But inside I knew I was supposed to do that. And so that infused knowledge is very important. And if you wrestle with, should you move forward in your spiritual life, don't feel bad. That's part of the process, okay? But listen to that inner voice, because that's spirit talking. Number four, the fourth level is taking on the mantle of the mystical traveler, which is done by totally surrendering to the will of God. Once you embark on this path, there is nothing that can make you turn back or deflect or negate it. As they say, as it is written, so it will be. That sounds like some Wicca there, doesn't it? However, at this stage, there is no validation, only acceptance of your gift and what it entails. You see, I think for me that point number 4 happened literally the day I turned in my resignation. I worked for an engineering company. I was a technical writer. I was not a great writer, technical writer. I did it. I liked it, paid the bills. But I knew there was more. And that day I sat and wrote my resignation was the day where I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. I had wrestled with this for several months. And I remember turning in that application and thinking, oh God, have I done the right thing? Panic came over me. But then a peace came over me, and I just knew. I knew that it would work okay. Now, as it said here, however, at this stage, there is no validation, only acceptance of your gift. And at that point, I said, well, I accept it. I'm ready to go for it. I don't understand what's going on. Who knows? You see, this is the irony about being psychic. Most psychics will tell you we're not psychic for ourselves. So when you say, well, Bob G, didn't you know the future was going to be great? Honestly, I didn't. Now, my teacher had trained me, gave me readings, and said, oh, you're on a path of great success. You'll be well-known psychic. I just didn't get that at the time. And, I never can still see my future. But that's okay, because the spirit guides keep me on track, All right, point number 5. The 5th level is the activation of the gift of being a mystical traveler. This means that you'll do and go wherever God's will directs you. Remember that such status won't override your chart, but will make it more elongated and intense. You must keep in mind that even before you came into life, you wrote in the opportunity to become a mystical traveler or a mission life entity. Okay? So what this means is that you know, when you take this on, you realize it's not all about your ego. It's not about like, oh, I'm going to do this and this. It's about saying, okay, I'll serve. You know, taking on the mantle is like taking on the priesthood. It really is a form of priesthood. And when I took on my Wiccan priesthood, you know, at that time, I don't think I became a mystical traveler, but I was being greater strengthened, prepared for it. And so, mystical traveler doesn't necessarily come in terms of ordination. I've received ordinations, but it was later that I became a mystical traveler. So they're kind of different, you know. There's the outer world technos of ordination, and there's the inner world of mystical traveler. And it does require a lot of humility because, you know, you might think, you know, I know everything, I know what I'm doing. But really, you're answering to the highest power, the God, the goddess, however you define the Godhead. In spiritualism, we call God infinite intelligence. So you're aligning yourself with the power of infinite intelligence. Now, who knows better, my will or divine will? Please. All right, God does give us intelligence and will, but when you're a mystical traveler, that will may suddenly be illumined by divine will, which may change some of your plans. So you got to be open to that, okay? And as you know, I said earlier, and she says here, you did write in your chart the option to become a mystical traveler or life mission entity. All right, point number 6. The 6th and final level is graduation. That is going home and getting your next assignment. After you go through the orientation process on the other side, that's the spirit world, you go wherever and do whatever God wishes. So this is at the end of your earthly life. You know, if you're a mystical traveler, you get to graduate, which means you go back to the light. You get to go home. And I can tell you, you don't want to miss that. Now, suicide won't get you there. A lot of people say, well, gee, if it's so great, why don't we all just kill ourselves and go home? It doesn't work that way. You have to stay the course to get the blessing. I had a near-death experience, as I told many of you, many years ago in a car accident. And I briefly went to the light and saw the light and saw God, saw the infinite intelligence. It changed me forever. And so I invite you, you know, to understand that when you take this on, you're going to get blessing in this life. And the ultimate blessing is when you go home, you'll go home in a state of beauty and light and glory. So you don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss that. So make life count. Make it now. Now, as I said earlier, you don't have to be a mystical traveler. You don't have to be a mission life entity. You know, love God. Sylvia Brown said this, and I have to quote her. I give her credit. This is her words. Love God. Love your neighbor. Do some good in the world while you're here. And then when it's all said and done, just shut up and go home. You see, that's true spirituality. And so I wanted to share these 6 points today with you from Sylvia Brown's book, Mystical Travel. I would encourage you to pick this up. You can get it at Amazon.com or eBay. You know, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. So anyways, guys, I hope that helps you today. As I said, I've got to cut this short. I'm on a tight schedule. So we'll have our channeling next week. But I thank you for being here. And listen, if you want to get on my schedule for a private reading, call my office, 571-483-2112. The number will be in the info box below, or you can write to me at my email, which will also be below, readings@robert-hickman, HICKMAN.com. Again, that will all be below. I'd love to talk to all of you. Listen, tell me in the comments box below, have you been feeling the call to be a mystical traveler? Maybe you've already accepted the mantle. Maybe you didn't know it and you did it and you didn't realize that's the term. But tell me what you're feeling about being a mystical traveler? Do you think you might want to be one? Do you think maybe you're already one? Maybe you're just discovering, like, wow, I've been a mystical traveler and didn't know it. Anyways, let's have a discussion. Share your comments in the boxes, the info box below, or the comments box below this video. Guys, listen, thank you for being here. Love you guys. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Sunday. We've got the witching hour, 8 p.m. Eastern U.S. time, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 p.m. Pacific, 1 a.m. London time, 2 a.m. Paris time. Make sure to be here. You don't want to miss it. We had such a good turnout last week. We had a great time. So definitely be here, and we're going to have an awesome time together. We're going to discuss all things magical and Wicca. Anyways, I love you guys. Sending blessings to you. We'll see you back here tomorrow for the witching hour. And until then, may you always blessed